What they're doing with it. So I'm guessing it wasn't always that way. Like, how did you get into the funny? How did you guys get
Well,
into
it all seems like he used humor as a survival tactic.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
But that, again, my father did use that, but for me, because I was small and I was never a great athlete, so I would tell my father, I just got on the Little League team, I'm going to play baseball, will you come? He said, you play baseball? How do you play? Dad, come to the basketball game. You play basketball? So the one thing I never shared with them was the funny. And because I didn't want them to fuck it up and to denigrate it. And it didn't take till I was in my 50s, my mother's caretaker asked my mother, she said, you must have gone to all the talent shows and seen Sandy. He must have been, and she said to the caretaker, she said, I never went to a show, I was too busy. Well, my parents never came, and you know what, thank God, because that's all I had left.
Okay, but wait a minute, they had to be proud when you were in those Mel Brooks movies. Come on, that had to be.
Yeah, well, but see, for my father, it was never enough. When I was in a Mel Brooks movie, he would tell people I was Mel's partner. When I would come to visit them in Florida, my wife and I have a rule, no more than 4 days. He would tell his friends, they would say, why is he leaving so soon? He said, Spielberg. He's Spielberg's partner, and Spielberg sent a plane to pick him up and take him back. So no matter what I did, it was never enough, and my father would exaggerate as he did about being Gopher Smith. So you know what, you get to a point as an adult where you're done trying to prove yourself to your father, because no matter what I did. So yeah, he was proud, but it was more about him. Everything was more about him. He was the center of the universe.
When I told my mother that there was somebody interested in a piece, wanted to put women who write up on a bigger platform, and I said, but you know, they want to own a piece of it. And she said, well, why? It's not worth anything.
Oh, honey.
So I hear you.
Yeah.
So yeah, brutal. So how did you guys find the funny? How did you find your way to the funny?
I think that I've always looked at things to find out what's funny. I had an older sister who was the pretty one, and I was the funny one. But let me tell you something, sister. Let me tell you something, sister. The roles have reversed.
It's all that sex you're getting.
There you go. Yes, and the regular sex. But I've always thought of what's funny. You know, and so, like, with these things that went on at my house, with all three of my daughters, not just with one, I had to go at night and be a comedian. Oh. So you're going in and you're having to be funny, and maybe the police were at your house all day, or maybe someone's in intensive care, or maybe, you know, whatever. You got to be funny. But after a while, it started to be, I would think to myself, thank God I'm so blessed, because I get to do this. I get to come in here and not be in the intensive care for this half hour. And be funny and look at people and they're laughing and they're out, and you know what I mean? And just be funny, and thank you God. And everyone doesn't have that. I mean, how great is that? That's true. You know, so that's always been kind of the thing that saved me, that kept me, so that, you know, I can go into a comedy club and have whatever's going on at home, some crazy thing, and laugh with a bunch of comics, you know, in the back of the room, because they're crazy people, but we're all laughing and, you know, going back and forth. And I would leave that night and think, thank you God, and now I can go on with tomorrow. I can make it through a little bit more. So I don't know how people do it without it.
That's a good point.
I have no idea.
How about you, Anna? How'd you find it?
I grew up in a pretty funny family, but it was a funny family that also had a lot of violence in it. And I think, you know, I come from people who grew up in Appalachia, and there's a huge comedy tradition there. It's true. I would go to my family reunions, and my uncles, like toothless as they were,
funny ours are.
It's very funny. So I grew up with a dad who had a very kind of Will Rogers type sense of humor. These little things would pop out that everybody thought was very funny. But I also grew up in a family where, you know, my mom had the stuffings beat out of her about every weekend. So you have that going on, and for me, it's always been a defense mechanism. It's just, you know, whoop, out comes the drawbridge, because if they're laughing, they're not asking questions. If they're laughing, they're not, you know. I mean, I also used to have hair that did this, like Ruth Buzzy on junior high. And you know, you toughen up pretty quickly when you look like Ruth Buzzy when you're 11. And if you already look like a jackass, you might as well be funny. So it's always been a defense mechanism. It used to get me in a lot of trouble at work because I'm a bit of a late bloomer as far as performing. I used to be a crisis communications consultant. Not funny. Not at all funny. But the jokes keep coming, and I used to get in a lot of trouble because you can't really, you know, you can't stop it. Like what happened to your CEO? You know, the material is coming and coming. So I've been funny unprofessionally for my life as kind of like an affliction that I don't think I could turn off. And it's such a joy to have people respond in an official setting. That's kind of a new thing for me, honestly. But it can get in the way. I mean, one of the in the first novel that I wrote, which is kind of the one I cut my teeth on, very funny book, I think. But when I got my first set of notes back on it from a real author, the question, you know, friends won't tell you the truth, but a real author will say, "Why is she so funny?" And that was a huge bucket of cold water because I had to kind of dig past that. Yeah, because it's the old formula: comedy equals tragedy plus time. And I had left out the tragedy part, and that was a huge eye opener for me. And I'm still learning a lot about that, but I don't think you can really separate the two because if you don't have all those colors in there, it doesn't get you right here. Then it's just a rim shot kind of a joke. It's not the one where you go, oh yeah, and you have a little wince that goes with it because it plucks your heartstrings. But that's where I come from.
So everybody here, it sounds like, well, no, maybe you had parental support for what you did. Wait, before we get, your brother is still practicing? Is he still practicing?
I don't know. His emails are come Dr. T. Helberg.
Oh my
But
Is that not the most unbelievable story? How is this possible?
you know, the thing about, just to get back being funny, my parents never came to see me do anything. So when I was in high school, their friends would run into them and say, "Oh, we saw the talent show. Your son was hysterical."
They would really never?
Never. Said he was hysterical. He was hysterical. My father would say, "Him? Funny? He has no personality. How could he be funny?" At home I didn't. But my brother, they wound up doing an intervention in Paris, and I've told a couple of people, he went from having a wife and 2 kids in a chateau outside of, and a beautiful office, to carrying 2 black garbage bags with everything he owned up and down the Champs-Elysees, smoking crack in phone booths, getting his car stolen, his wallet stolen. They did an intervention. They took him from Paris to Hazleton, which is in Minneapolis. He was one of the oldest guys there. He was 55. And he told them he was a doctor. And so he was counseling young patients on the side. And so they called me from Hazleton and said, "You know, your brother's told us he's a doctor. He's a doctor. We've looked it up on computers. We don't find, what medical school did he go to?" And I said, "He went to my father's medical school. My father made it up. He never was a doctor. And you know what? As far as I know, I don't know if he's still clean, but he still goes under the name of Dr. Ted Helberg." So,
Wow.
but this is the only part of his life, his fantasy, that he can hold on to. You know.
Okay, so now, were your parents proud of him?
Oh, my father was thrilled.
You know, this is
He
this
knew.
is just.
You know, and my brother, the incompetent attorney, he only became an attorney because my father made him. And he couldn't get out of the parking